everybody, and welcome to Lauren Loves Color. This is Lauren. This is the highly anticipated tutorial on how to utilize alcohol markers. Now, if you're new to my channel, hi, my name is Lauren. I have been what I consider an amateur adult colorist for about a year now, and I do this as a hobby. I do it for fun. It's just purely for my own enjoyment, and so I like to share that with others on my channel, and a lot of questions that I have received have been about what are the basics of utilizing alcohol markers. Alcohol markers are my medium of choice. They're what I prefer to color in. They're fast, they're bold, they give a nice, beautiful effect, but there is definitely a learning curve to alcohol markers. And so what I want to do with you today is to kind of share with you some tips and tricks of what I've learned. We're going to be coloring a very quick and easy page together just so you can see especially how to use alcohol markers in a large space. Now, utilizing smaller spaces in coloring, it's a little bit easier, but there is a learning curve when using a larger space. It definitely can lead to streaking if you're not careful. I'm going to show you quickly. Can I find it? Yes, it's right here. Sorry about that. I should have been better prepared. I'm going to show you where I started. This was one of the very first ever coloring pages that I did with alcohol marker as a brand new colorist. This was done almost exactly a year ago from the date that I'm filming. This was, I did this on August 31st of 2020, and most of this is based on alcohol marker, especially her sweater and outfit and her kind of the background of the school. What I want to show you is a mistake that I commonly see with alcohol markers. When we talk about streaking are, you know, what you can see, these kind of defined lines of where the alcohol ink has dried. You can even see it here, kind of in the background space here. And so what I want to show you is how to avoid that in your alcohol marker pictures, and kind of show you the tools and things that I use. And if you do make a mistake, how you technically can correct it. So first, let's talk about what you need to actually complete this page with me as I talk through the tools and get the zooming right and everything ready for you. So first, let's talk alcohol markers. There's a wide variety of different types of alcohol markers, brands of alcohol markers, and I know a lot of people like to know what tools and things that I use. This was my very first set of alcohol markers. These are the Caliart art markers. This is the 100 set of Caliart art markers. They now sell them in a larger set, in a 120, and I think they even have a 160 and a 180. They have large sets of alcohol markers, but if you're new to adult coloring, I would say the 100 set is by far the most that you need. If you are doing color by number, you definitely can get away. I have used this set in every single color by number book that I own. This gives you the nice variety of colors that you need. I've never owned a set smaller than this in the Caliart, so it's possible you could get away with like the 80 set or something as well. But when you're starting out, especially if you've never used alcohol markers as a medium before, I think it's somewhat beneficial to buy a smaller set and see if you actually like them. So this set is actually linked down below in the description box. These are my go-to markers. They come looking like this. And what you'll see here is there's a gray line right here on the marker. It comes with actually two tips of marker. The gray line is always indicative of either the fine tip or the brush tip. So this one has a fine tip on one end, and then it has a chisel tip on the other. This is pretty common in the art markers. They also sell Caliart. What I like about them too is they sell the same colorway, all these same colors in a brush marker set. Those I don't usually recommend for beginners just because there's a little bit more of a learning curve in how to use those, but these work really great. They're really juicy. They don't yellow your pages. They're really a really wonderful set of markers. They're very well made. I don't believe these are available across the pond outside of the United States, but Ohuhu also makes some art markers. There's a company, Spree, that makes markers as well, very similar to these. And even if you're a beginner and all you have are Sharpies or Bic intensity markers, just start with those. Permanent markers are also alcohol-based markers. They don't hold quite as much ink, and sometimes there's a little bit of a smell to them. And so just be cognizant of that. These do have a very slight smell, but it doesn't bother me at all. well, and Sharpies definitely bother me. The other thing I like about Caliart markers too is on the gray label on the back, there is actually a color name for you, and on the tops of the caps here, you also have a color number. That makes it easy if you want to swatch these out in a swatch book to kind of keep track of your colors. You definitely can. So let's talk about what you need when you're coloring with alcohol markers. Number one, obviously your coloring book or whatever your coloring picture is going to be of choice. I'm going to be coloring today from the Easy Coloring Book by Jade Summer. You also want to take blotter pages. These are simply just sheets of paper, old bills or recyclable material, whatever you have, cardstock you can use. I usually use printer paper. It's just something simple, easy, and accessible for me. It doesn't have to be blank. I have plenty of blotter pages that look just like this, that have multiple, you know, drawings and things on them too, but I just wanted to use something nice, white, and clean for the purposes of this video here. And the reason being is because alcohol marker does seep through pages, so it does go through the page. So it's very important to note that if you're coloring with alcohol markers, really try to pick out a page that is single-sided, so meaning that it doesn't have an image on the other side, or else you are going to ruin that image. Alcohol markers are different than water-based markers. Obviously, these are alcohol-based with isopropyl alcohol. There are also water markers, but water markers are always going to leave streaks. Those are your typical Crayola markers, Crayola Super Tips and things like that, but those are really great for books that are double-sided because they don't have a tendency to bleed through pages. So let's talk a little bit about the basics of alcohol markers. One thing that you're going to want to do is just to make sure when you color with alcohol markers, and I just want to demonstrate very quickly, is that when you actually color, try to use your chisel nib as much as possible if you can and still stay in the lines. Alcohol markers provide a really nice depth and swipe of color, but also when you color, just because you can use your chisel nib in different ways. So you can make it a little bit finer, you can make the line a little bit more narrow, or you can make the line a little bit more bold. The other thing about alcohol markers too is that if you wait for the alcohol to dry and then you try to go back over it again, that is where you're going to find your streaking. So this is pretty dry, and the reason that I would know that it's dry is it's not cool to the touch, and also when you color with alcohol markers, it's going to make the page slightly transparent. But if you try to go over alcohol marker that has been dried, as you will see that this will dry, it's going to actually create a little bit of a streak. Let me zoom in here for you. So you see as this is drying, there's a distinct line so that you can see where I have colored over the next. But if you continuously go in a circle or in an area without picking up your pen, you will see that this is going to dry as one consistent area and that it's not going to have this streak in the middle. And that is what's really key with alcohol markers. So I'll show you why I made this mistake in this book and why you're getting streaking with your alcohol markers. In this page here, when we learn to color, and I don't know if you're this way or if you're not, I learned to go through and to outline an area and then color it in. That is why this created streaking, is I outlined these areas here and then I went back and colored it in once the alcohol marker was dry. You don't want to do that. Instead, you want to put your alcohol marker consistently all the way throughout and try to get through the space as much as possible without lifting your pen or letting it dry. Another technique that helps with that too, to make sure you have a nice consistency in color, is to color in circles. So as you color your space, you're literally going to be using your marker in circles as you color throughout the page. And what that will do is it will keep the page nice and saturated with a consistent color, and isn't going to keep it to where there's inconsistency in color throughout the page and you're not going to have that streaking. So let's go ahead and let's demonstrate this in a page. If you're wanting to color along on this page with me, I am going to show you in this easy coloring book. I'm going to be coloring, because we're getting close to fall, I'm going to be coloring this page of a pumpkin here. I thought this was a nice, simple, easy page for us to do together. And the important thing too is if you are interested, I am going to be doing a part 2 to this as well, where we're going to be coloring or doing the background with Distress Oxides and getting to demonstrate that. So I'm going to take my blotter pages, and it's important, especially if you use copy paper, that you use more than one, because definitely more than one is going to is going to be needed for this area. Now, when I work with alcohol marker, I'm going to be working with 3 different colors. So you can see them here. I'm going to be doing with Y416, G915, and Y423 are the only 3 colors I'm going to use on this page. So when I map out how I want to do my alcohol marker, I want to kind of plan what I want to do, because like I said, you don't want to outline the page and then go back and circle it in. You kind of want to start in one area and go up or go down, and you can break it up. Once you get to these bold black lines, there's not going to be a problem with a line or anything, because you've got a nice break of a black line. But you do want to plan to work your way in one section, you know, or another. Also, the important thing too is, what was I going to say about that? Is to, I don't know what I was going to say. It'll come back to me, I promise. Sorry guys, I'm kind of trying to film this a little bit quickly, but it is important to me that I just demonstrate these things to you. So I just want to make sure that you kind of know to plan for where you want your alcohol marker to go. Oh, that's what I was going to say, is also for pages that you may not have such a bold line like what I do here, you don't have to get your ink all the way up to the line, or else it's going to bleed over. It'll kind of spread, especially on any books that you buy from Amazon. The paper's a little bit thinner. It kind of soaks in the ink really quickly. And so usually what you want to do if you have a thinner line is you want to get kind of close to the edge, but not all the way to the edge with your ink. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start here, and you're going to notice I'm just going to do small circles. And like I said, try to do your chisel nib as much as possible, because what that will do too is that will ensure that you get enough marker on there and that it goes quickly. You have to move somewhat quickly with alcohol markers. Also, the important thing to know with alcohol markers too is it's always going to look really, really dark at first, especially if you have these black back pages behind it, because it makes the page slightly translucent. And so at first you're going to be coloring with your marker and go like, oh my gosh, this color is so dark. But if you have these swatched on a separate sheet of paper or in a separate swatch book, you'll soon figure out that they're not, to just not worry about that. Okay, all right, so I have that section done. So now I'm going to do this big section here. I'm going to work from the top down, and I'm going to use kind of the broader chisel here because I've got a pretty large space. And the chisel nib is pretty versatile. And like I said, sometimes it's really nice when you're working on these easier pages to start with this than trying to start with a page that's really, really detailed and you have a lot of color. This is also really nice too because it shows already some natural shading. And because the lines on this are so bold, you can kind of go right up to the line with your marker and not worry about it bleeding over. Okay, so do you see here too how much darker this looks in comparison to this, because this is already drying? Okay. All right, so we're gonna go on to the next one. And the important thing is like in these big sections, you can work from left to right, top to bottom, but the more you kind of think about not picking up your marker and just continuing to go, and continuing to work, the better. And you can see it just creates this really, really beautiful color. Just that smooth, consistent, almost like it was printed that way kind of look. And it's important to have nice, really good, juicy markers. If your markers are dried out, you're gonna get that streaky look even if you use the right technique. Also, an important thing to note, like with these Caliart markers or any type of art marker, or these just alcohol markers in general, you typically want to store the markers sideways. Don't let them just sit up and down when you're done using them, or else the ink is going to run to one side of the marker or the other, and you'll end up drying out one side of your markers. So just be cognizant of that. Okay, so that's already about halfway done. And on the little pumpkin, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the wrong technique, but then also how we can fix it. I always try to fix these things as best as possible. And I have learned some tricks over time on how to fix it. Okay. So hopefully you're getting, and you'll see on the back here, definitely the bleed through from the page that I'm coloring on right now. So that's why it's so important to have a blotter page. And these Caliarts that I have, I am starting to run dry on quite a few of them. They've lasted me for about a year. Okay, so let's talk real quick about the number 0 marker. This is also known as your colorless blender, and it's technically kind of like it's a magic tool for coloring with alcohol markers, and I'll show you why. We're going to use this in depth here in just a minute, but one thing I do want to show you is this area that's at the very bottom of the pumpkin. I slightly colored outside of the line, and what you can do is, this is just alcohol. Oh, this is the brush marker. Do I have one that's a non-brush? I don't. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to have to show you with a brush marker, but they do have colorless blenders that are just regular nibs, like the art marker that you have. You can simply put that there, and what it will do as it dries is it fades the color a little bit, so it acts like an eraser. I do also have a little area up here where I slightly went outside the lines. I can use that alcohol there, and it will somewhat lighten the color. So you're still going to be able to see it, but it lightens the color. The important thing to know is when you use this colorless blender, if you want to use it for purposes of like erasing, like what I just showed you, is you need to use it while the alcohol is still somewhat wet. Once it's dry, it's pretty much set in place. It's not going anywhere. Okay. So let's take a look at this pumpkin, and what I want to do is I want to make a mistake with it and then kind of show you how I can fix it using the colorless blender. So what we're going to do is what I showed you before is the mistake that I made in my first picture. So what we're going to do is we're going to outline this pumpkin just like I did before. Okay, I'll outline this section. This is how I learned to draw and how I learned to color. Was to outline first. And I will tell you, there's nothing wrong with this technique. If this still gets you an outcome that you enjoy, then don't feel like anything is wrong with this. It's just if you're looking for a streak-free method of doing alcohol markers, that's the route you're going to need to go. So now that I've outlined, now I'm going to go ahead and go in and I'm going to fill in my pumpkin. So I want to show you that even if you get some streaking, that it's going to be okay. And technically on my other pages, I could fix this, but I've chosen not to because I think what's nice about coloring too is to see the journey that you came from and to kind of see how far you've come as a colorist and not to be overly critical about what you do. Alcohol markers took me a lot of practice and a lot of watching other people on ColorTube, just literally watching, sitting and watching them color to understand what they were doing. And through watching ColorTubers, I would find one or two little tricks or tips or something about what they did that was different from me that would make a difference in my coloring. So we're gonna let that pumpkin dry for a minute. And then what we're gonna do next is let's go ahead and go in while this one is drying, and I'll show you how we fix that one in a minute. Let's go ahead and do the stem. I'm gonna do the stem in this brown, which is Y423. And again, I love a good chisel nib. And as you get more comfortable with alcohol marker, you'll get used to using it. And for me, I call this book is really like my practice book. So this is like my play around book. This is not my everything has to be perfect book. This is my make mistakes, try something out for the first time, get comfortable with it, and kind of adapt my, adapt my technique book. And again, I'm just coloring in circles each part of the stem, kind of up to that or close to that black line. Now these black lines that separate the parts of the stem are a lot thinner, so I'm not going quite up to the edge. The important thing is to, even more so, the being in circles or coloring in circles, because that can feel a little bit unnatural at first, is to make sure you go over the area where you previously colored, kind of like to smooth it out or to keep it kind of wet while you're continuing to color. You really want to make sure that that color is well saturated, because especially in these markers like the Caliarts and different things like that too, even some of more my expensive Copic markers, if you don't keep a consistent color or saturation on it, it's going to look faded in some areas and more saturated in others. Okay. So we have that done there. We're gonna go ahead and do the green, and then I'm gonna come back and show you how we fix the pumpkin. This is G915. This is the green we're gonna use for these like little leaves and little sprout things coming off of the pumpkin. I am not, if you're new to my channel, I'm not much of a colored pencil user. There's absolutely beautiful work that you can do with colored pencils, but I'm not patient enough for them. So I do a lot of work in marker and in crayon. And so that's what I'm going to show you guys today. So if you want to stick around, the next part to this video is going to be that I'll have all 3 videos linked in all of them together, because I'm going to release these all at the same time how I do shading with crayon again, because some people wanted kind of a second demonstration on that, and I feel like with a page like this I can do it. I can show it a little bit better because it's not as detailed of a page. So we'll do that again. And when I say shading with crayon, I literally mean crayon. Crayola crayons. And I'm also going to do my Distress Oxide backgrounds. Those are a lot of fun. But see how nice that looks? You can start to see now the streakiness in the pumpkin from the way that I colored it. So, but like I said, no frets. There is a way that I learned that you can somewhat fix that texture. Again, like with this leaf, I'm gonna start from the top and just slowly work my way down, going side to side. Making sure that I get even color all the way throughout. And with the fine nib too, you would just do the same thing, color in circles. And I'll kind of show you. I'll do this very last part with my little fine nib here. And just color all the way down. Okay, there we go. That looked nice. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this streakiness. So let's say we did this, we're like, oh my gosh, I'm not happy with it. I really want to fix this. Here's what I would suggest. Start with a nice fresh sheet of paper back here, because when you do this technique, it can pull the pigment off your blotter sheet forward. So make sure you have a nice fresh sheet. And then we're going to be using your colorless blender. This was one of the other alcohol marker brands I was talking about. Sorry, my watch is frozen, so I can't tell if you can see this or not, but these are my, these are spree markers. These are also really, really great alcohol markers. I have this is what the brush nib looks like in the brush markers. Like I said, I don't recommend these for a beginner, but if you're a little more advanced, these are wonderful to work with. I'm going to use the chisel nib here. There's just isopropyl alcohol in these, and what you can do is you can go over the whole area and it's going to really blend everything together. So I'll show you here. It's going to darken the pigment a little bit, and it's not perfect. You're still going to see some streaking, but it almost creates some texture, and it's almost a pretty cool effect. Especially if you're doing something like a background or a concrete or things like that. And honestly, those larger areas is where most people kind of mess up. So if you're doing food, flowers, anything like that, even utilizing this technique can help. And it's not that it completely corrects the streaking, but it almost puts some texture on your page. And I use this a lot, even in areas where I don't make mistakes, just because I really like the effect of the texture. And you can use a colorless blender on any type of alcohol marker, and you can refill these colorless blenders. You can take this nib here. You literally have like a little set of tweezers. You can take this, can take it out, and then you'd use a little pipette and you can fill it with alcohol. And you're going to get some pigment on the end of your marker from kind of what you're coloring, but just on a scratch sheet of paper, just take the nib and just kind of color on a blank sheet of paper and the pigment will come off. So, and you see how it's already creating this texture, but it's like consistent texture, so it kind of smooths it around. And we're going to do that to our whole pumpkin, so that we can give both of our pumpkins a very similar look. But it kind of brings it to life. The only place where I really found where utilizing this technique doesn't work is skin. I find that when you use this technique on skin, of course, it's going to make your skin look a little textured, which is not usually what you want when you're looking at a picture. But you see, it creates just a really, really nice, beautiful effect. So I usually find this really desirable. I credit Emily from Color Me Impressed as the one who taught me about this technique, and then I've kind of slowly over time like realized like, oh, with some of this smearing and streaking that I have, these colorless blenders really can help to even it out. But really now I use it a lot for special effects when I'm doing concrete or backgrounds or plants or, you know, whatever. Water, it's a really cool effect if you're coloring water. And then you use this over the water, it can kind of create make it just look more like water. Just makes it look more real. And this you don't have to be as careful about. You definitely still want to make sure you go in kind of a, like I said, like a standard motion. You kind of want to go up and down or side to side, you know, or whatever, because I will tell you that it will definitely streak as well. But it's real fast and creates just a really cool looking effect. See, do you see how much it's helped like with the streaking on this pumpkin? I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you can see it. It's definitely helped a lot with a little pumpkin here. It's not perfect. I can still see some of the lines, but you can also go over it again, but it definitely looks like it blends more in with the pumpkin. And so it makes a very, very much better look. So we're gonna let that just dry for a minute. So that is really all that you need to know with alcohol markers. Like I said, they take a little bit of practice. They definitely are a slight learning curve if you're learning how to utilize them, but they're also a really great medium. I mean, if I was coloring this in colored pencil, you know, or even crayon, it would take even a bit longer than this to even do, you know, this much of the page. So within 5 to 10 minutes, you can color the whole page and be really good to go. So this area still needs to dry a little bit more, but it will definitely dry. It's going to look great. And so what I'm going to do is, this is going to be it for this video. So if this is all that you're interested in, is the alcohol markers and how to utilize them and kind of create a streak-free look, then this is the end of the video for you. I'm going to be moving on to phase 2, which is going to be shading with crayon. That's going to be adding some more texture and depth to this page and adding some more color. And then last but not least, I'm going to be having a part 3 where I do my distress oxides. So I definitely hope that you have enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.